The Internal Revenue Service estimates that the aggregate private net worth of American citizens is $141 trillion. That's what all of us Americans collectively are worth. The on-balance sheet liabilities of the federal government, not including state and local governments or individual debts or corporate debts, just the federal government debt, is $36 trillion. 30 trillion net of the Fed's own balance sheet. So 30 trillion net debt. The difficulty is below that line. The net present value of off-balance sheet liabilities, which is to say Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, federal pensions, military pensions, the net present value of unfunded federal promises in the United States exceeds $100 trillion. So if you add the on-balance sheet liabilities, 30 trillion, to the off-balance sheet liabilities, 100 trillion, and you subtract that to the net worth, the private net worth of Americans at $141 trillion, you only have $11 trillion left over. The on-balance sheet deficits increase by $2 trillion a year, meaning that you use up the net worth of Americans in 5 years. But the off-balance sheet liabilities also increase by $2 trillion a year. This is problematic. I don't believe, arithmetically, that there is any way that we can service our obligations, our entitlement obligations. The upshot of that for investors, where the rubber meets the road, is that I believe that we will have to allow the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar to decline so that we can honor our nominal debts while not honoring our real debts. Mm-hmm. We did that in the United States in the decade of the 1970s. In the 1970s, according to the Congressional Budget Office, the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar declined by 75%, not relative to other currencies, but in an absolute sense. And I believe because of this $100 trillion in unfunded entitlement liabilities, that the U.S. dollar will lose 75% of its purchasing power over 10 years. This is a crisis that we'll get through, just like we got through the decade of the 70s. But it's a crisis that will require preparation for people. And I suspect that they start planning for that, both in terms of how they save and in terms of what their expectations are for their retirement. I think people need to plan right now.
Rick Santelli joins us from the CME. Rick, there are so many things that are swirling around this. We know about the Moody's downgrade. We know that that raises some concerns about things that we already knew were out there for the last decade and plus. What do you see with these moves in the Treasury market this morning?
Well, part of me wants to look at the downgrade as something probably a bit more important than it is. And what I mean by that is, as we see our politicians in D.C. trying to figure out and push through the budget, I would hope that the Moody's message and some of the agita that the media expressed when it occurred will hit home. I would like to see a little fear on deficits. I would like to see the threshold of worrying about deficits raised a bit.
They are risking a fiscal disaster.
But it does mean waning demand for treasuries versus commodities in particular.
Will they have to print more? Will they have to inflate it away?
A global collapse of trust in the system itself, the kind of signal that usually only comes before a reset that will directly impact your savings, your borrowing rates, and the value of every dollar you hold.
What we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new accounting is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on.
Historically, the U.S. could get away with borrowing excessive amounts at low rates because it controls the global reserve currency, the dollar. As long as there's demand for dollars, there's demand for treasuries. But now the debt has grown so large at a time when other nations are moving away from the dollar, reducing their dollar dependence, that the United States is approaching a point where they're going to have to borrow more just to cover the interest on their debt. And when a system is eating itself to survive, that's when you know a collapse is close. Something that is not only obvious, but now confirmed by these downgrades that don't even take into consideration the biggest risk of all, governments, specifically the United States, printing money to pay for its own debt. Ray Dalio, famous macroeconomic strategist and investor, just warned that things are going to get a whole lot worse. Dalio put it bluntly. For those who care about the value of their money, the risks for U.S. government debt are greater than the rating agencies are conveying. Even U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently admitted that these credit rating downgrades are a lagging indicator in what was probably an attempt to relieve some of the blame from the current administration. And while let's be clear, this didn't happen overnight, this is decades in the making of government overspending and intervention. Calling this a lagging indicator is not a vote of confidence. If anything, it's confirmation that what is coming next is going to be worse.
The BIS is the Bank of International Settlements, and it's the central bank of central banks.
Where is that located?
It's in Basel, Switzerland, and it has 63 of the most powerful central banks as its members, and the New York Fed and the Fed are both shareholders. They became shareholders in 1994.
In one sentence, what's the purpose of the Bank of International Settlements?
Okay, so there are two things you need to know about the Bank of International Settlements.
I'm not sure my brain's big enough for this, but keep going.
It is.
Okay.
It has sovereign immunity.
What does that mean?
It's above the law.
It's its own country.
Right. It's its own country. It has its own police force. And essentially, other than one of its staff being in a car accident or, minor things, no one has the legal authority to move against it. Okay. It has sovereign immunity. That's number one. Number two, it can move money and hold it on its on its balance sheet and manage money secretly. So if I want to, I'm grossly oversimplifying, if I want to steal $21 trillion from the U.S. government and park it on the balance sheet of the BIS, it can move it anywhere in the world and it can keep it on its balance sheet secretly.
Why would there be an organization? First of all, where does its power? Like, who empowered it to have sovereign immunity and the right?
It was created after World War I and sort of collected its powers and got going in the 30s. And it was created in theory to manage the reparations of the German government. But if you read the real history, it was because the Bank of England and the central bankers wanted an entity that had sovereign immunity. They wanted to be able to move money secretly. So, for example, if you look at what happened during World War II and all the money that was moving back and forth between the Germans and Americans, Dulles was over in Switzerland helping to manage all these transfers back and forth. So there's a wonderful book called The Tower of Basel by a wonderful Hungarian journalist where he documents and describes the whole history of the Bank of International Settlements. And if you want to understand power in this world, understanding how the Bank of International Settlements and the plumbing of the central banking system works is very, very important.
As Yuval Noah Harari, whom you will have the pleasure to listen to in this conference, said, "Money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. The unified ledger system would build on the trust of the two-tier system of today's financial system. All transactions are carried in commercial bank money, but their final settlement happens in central bank money."
People need to understand finance. At the present moment, I think that maybe 1% of the population really understands how the financial system works. What happens if this number goes down to zero? No human being, no president, no prime minister, nobody in the central bank understands finance anymore because AI has made it too complicated. This could lead to a political and social crisis of a kind we've never encountered before. It could lead to power shifting from humans to algorithms, to alien forms of intelligence.
I believe that sometimes we need giant leaps that deliver a fundamental rethink of the financial system and foster the development of entirely new architectures.
Now, AI is the first tool that we created that can actually understand finance better than us. Because, finance in the end, it's the easiest thing for an AI to really understand. It's only data. It's only information.
No, I think maybe in a couple of decades when people look back, the thing they will remember from the COVID crisis is this is the moment when everything went digital. And if this was the moment when everything became monitored, that we agreed to be surveyed all the time, not just in authoritarian regimes, but even in democracies. And maybe most importantly at all, this was the moment when surveillance started going under the skin.
The head of the Bank of International Settlements is the central bank of central banks. And it's been running the process to implement basically an all digital monetary system. And they have innovation hubs all over the world. They've been running this process for a long time. And in 2020, when the pandemic started, or it was October 2020, so the pandemic was underway, the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements was on an IMF panel. And in 1 minute, it's the first time in my life I ever saw a central banker tell the truth. I fell off my chair. And he said, the beauty of this is we can set the rules on how your money works, and we have the technology to enforce them. And what he was saying is literally from one place in, anywhere in the world where the technology exists, you can track each person individually. You can set a complex list of rules, like legislation, regulation, and administrative policy, and you can enforce them all with the technology, with AI and software.
We tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
The nature of money is going to change quite dramatically. The old systems of trust and of ownership will have to adapt radically. Maybe the financial system will become so complicated as AI takes over more and more of the action that it will be just too complicated for the human mind.
A quiet but powerful shift in the global financial system is happening, and most people have no idea. Basel III Endgame, a set of banking regulations that look like routine risk management on the surface, may actually be setting the stage for something much bigger. Let me explain. For decades, gold has been considered a Tier 3 asset, meaning that banks had to discount its value on their accounting sheets, treating it as a risky asset. But now gold is reclassified as a Tier 1 asset, meaning that banks can account for 100% of its value on their balance sheets, treating it the same as cash and U.S. Treasuries. This is a game changer because in the past, if gold prices went up, it did not impact central banks that much. But now, for the first time in decades, gold prices going up significantly hugely benefits central banks.
The BRICS group is set to introduce a new currency backed by gold, in contrast to the credit-backed US dollar, with countries lining up to join the growing initiative.
The BRICS countries are planning to introduce a new trading currency which will be backed by gold. More and more countries recently expressed desire to join BRICS.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, it brings up a subject called Bitcoin and crypto and all that. People so distrust the US dollar or any fiat currency, that more and more people, countries, businesses are making their own crypto.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So, and being an old guy, I go, why go through that trouble of trying to figure out what's a real crypto and a fake crypto? Just give me one of these for $35. I'm a lot happier.
Yeah.
You can't print this. You can't store it. I mean, you can't, you can steal it, but you can't print this thing. And you can't print this. And 1,000 years from now, this will still be gold. And 1,000 years from now, this will still be silver.
The one final note I will make is that if you think about the benefits of digital money, there are huge potential gains. It's not just about digital forms of physical currency. You can have programmability, units of central bank currency with expiry dates. You could have, as I argue in my book, a potentially better and some people might see it, or a darker world where the government decides that units of central bank money can be used to purchase some things, but not other things that it deems less desirable, like, say, ammunition or drugs or pornography or something of the sort. And that is very powerful in terms of the use of a CBDC, and I think also extremely dangerous for central banks. Because ultimately, if you have different units of central bank money with different characteristics, or if you use central bank money as a conduit for economic policies in a very targeted way, or more broadly for social policies, that could really affect the integrity of central bank money and the integrity and independence of central banks. So there are wonderful notions of things that can be done with digital money, but again, I fear that technology could take us to a better place, but equally has the potential to take us to a pretty dark place.
A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability.
The nature of money is going to change quite dramatically. The old systems of trust and of ownership will have to adapt radically.
This is Richard Werner, the top academic scholar in the world on central banking. He wrote the book and did the documentary, The Princes of the Yen, about the Japanese central bank. Here he is in Malmo, Sweden, in May.
The nature of this CBDC, what is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that. Right. But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. He saw it, and it was around this large and would be implanted under your skin.
So look, I've been in the financial industry since 9/11, the day before 9/11, and I've owned stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, crypto, gold, you name it, I've owned it. But the one thing that's very important part of my portfolio all these years is gold. I love having a percentage of my net worth in gold that I have access to in case of many different things. A few facts you need to know about gold. Number one, the gold market cap is $11.8 trillion. Since 2000, the compound annual growth rate for gold has been 9.24%, and during times of high inflation, 3% plus, has been 15.35%. Now, those are just some numbers for you, but there's some other benefits to add gold to your portfolio. Number one, hedge against inflation. Number two, results showed recently that 93% of central banks are working on a CBDC. So this means what? That could be a manipulated currency that they own. If you own gold, it's a non-duplicatable asset. You're now hedging against CBDC taking place. Number three, a potential cyber threat. If it happens, you don't have access to your money, you don't have access to your accounts, well, you have access to your hard physical gold. Number four is anonymous. No one knows you have that gold. And last but not least, diversification.
CBDC. If that happens, we're done.
And so my question to you today for this Rich Dad Radio Show, this is fake money. Believe it or not, this is fake money. It looks like a Kennedy $50, but if you lift it up this way, it's fake. It's copper. This started in 1964. This little fake $50 is now worth $10, but it's fake. This here is real silver. It's about $35. Not that much. Everybody can afford $35. And this here is real gold. And we don't give investment advice, but right now I would do my best to get your head out of you know what and stop working hard and saving this stuff here. This is fake. This is fake. This is real. And this is real. Good luck to you all. Start going for real money, not fake money. Thank you.
My name is General Mike Flynn, and I want everyone to know that I stand fully behind Beverly Hills Precious Metals and its owner, Andrew Sorcini, a great friend of mine. We are facing one of the greatest periods of financial uncertainty in American history. And now is the time to organize your finances, seriously consider how you can take care of yourself and your family, and start making some serious decisions.
Since my name is Cash, I'm constantly worried about inflation. But to secure your cash going forward, buy into gold and silver today. Go to bh-pm.com today so you can go buy in gold and silver and secure your family's future. bh-pm.com. Call Beverly Hills Precious Metals, get your consultation, buy into gold and silver just like I'm doing today, and help secure your family's future.